Hi folks, Wooden Boat Dan here. Just wanted to give you a heads up. The podcast you're about to listen to was recorded several years ago, so some of the phone numbers, email addresses, website links, and time-sensitive information are no longer valid. Please keep that in mind as you listen. If you'd like to contact me, my email address is woodenboatdan@gmail.com. Thank you and enjoy the podcast. Welcome to Hooked on Wooden Boats weekly podcast episode number 153. I'm your host, Dan Matson, aka Wooden Boat Dan, and I would like to welcome you to the world's first podcast that's fully dedicated to celebrating the art, craft, history, tradition, and romance of wooden vessels all over our planet. And maybe there's people listening from other planets. You never know, folks. Thanks for joining me today. We're going to have fun as usual. Today's featured episode is an interview I did with Tug Buse. And this interview was actually played on episode 16 of Hooked on Wooden Boats, which would have been in early 2012, so a little bit over 2 years ago. So if you did hear it then, you're going to hear it again, folks. But if you're like me, you probably won't remember a lot of it from before. And it's a very fascinating interview, and I figure since I've done 153 episodes now, I have the right to replay an episode once in a while. So that is what I'm going to do today. In case you didn't hear the interview with Tug in episode 16, 2.5 years ago or so, Tug is a local fellow here in Washington State who, in 2011, I believe it was, he took a boat that he had built, a Bill Garden-designed sailboat. I believe it was 14 or 16 feet, something like that. And he made a trip in that boat over 3,000 miles, starting in, I want to say, Iowa, and going down the river system, hitting the Mississippi and some other waterways, and then taking the intercoastal waterway through the Gulf of Mexico, across Florida, and up the East Coast to Maine. And he encountered a lot of fascinating adventures along the way, so I would encourage you to stick around for that interview. Today's podcast is brought to you by Duckworks Boat Building Supply. Duckworks is located in Harper, Texas. It's an online site where you can order all kinds of boat building and maintaining type of stuff. I don't know if I said that quite right, but you get the picture. So if you're building a boat, you can buy fiberglass, and you can buy resin, and you can buy brushes, and you can buy boat plans, and you can buy boat sails, and you can buy boat hardware, and you can get anchors, and you can get lights. You can get books on boats. You can get plans for boats. They got really great stuff there, owned by a really great couple that are from Harper, Chuck and Sandra Lineweber, who I know personally. They do a great job. They got really fair prices. So I would encourage you to pop over to their website. You can do that by going to hookedonwoodenboats.com/duck, D-U-C-K. That'll take you to their landing page for Hooked on Wooden Boat listeners, and you can go from there and make some purchases and explore their site. They also have a magazine called Duckworks Magazine, which has almost 15 years of articles in it about boat building and boat cruising and all kinds of styles of boats. And you can check that out on their website also. Okay, if you'd like to subscribe to my almost monthly newsletter, it's an electronic newsletter. You can go to hookedonwoodenboats.com/subscribe. Give me your first and last name, email address, and you will get that letter. And I'm due to send one here in the next couple of weeks, which I will probably do that and talk about 2014, what happened this year in my wooden boat world and other wooden boat worlds of other people, and talk about plans for 2015. So sign up for that if you haven't already done so. I had planned on working in my garage this week to continue to get my shop set up so it's a little easier to work on my Scamp, which I just rolled into the garage a week ago. Actually, it's been almost 2 weeks now. But I got sidetracked with some work, some paid work, so I'm doing that this week and didn't get to work in the garage. But I got the Scamp in there, getting close to starting work on her. I know I've said that before, but I'll keep saying it till I start, right? Because I am close. Okay, we're going to dial up the interview with Tug Buse now, so let's roll the tape. Take it away, Tug and Dan. Okay, it's December 26, 2011. I am sitting down at Warm Beach with Tug Buse. Tug, welcome to the show today.
Well, thank you very much.
Great to have you. I heard Tug speak at the Center for Wooden Boats last month in November. He did an amazing trip in a small boat that he built. But before we go there, Tug, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up and how did you get into boating? And just give us a little personal history, if you would.
Well, I was born into boating. I mean, my parents boated since long before I was born, and I was raised in Warm Beach, Washington, as you pointed out, near Stanwood. Mm-hmm. And my parents have a house right on the water, right on Port Susan Bay. And so I grew up splashing around in the bay. I grew up building rafts out of driftwood and all that kind of stuff. My parents have a 30-foot retired wooden tugboat that I went on for the first time when I was 10 months old. Mm-hmm. And so salt water and voyaging in boats, particularly in wooden boats, I've been doing that my whole life.
Okay. So tell us about your growing up years and tell us about your name, too.
Well, when I was born, my real name is Michael, but when I was born, all my parents' friends knew that, my parents had this tugboat, and so they started calling me Tugboat Boy. And eventually, my name was shortened to just Tug. Mm-hmm. And it's a nickname that stuck with me my whole life. Everybody calls me Tug. I mean, except my bank. Everybody who knows me calls me Tug.
Yeah.
And it was really handy back when I used to have a landline. I mean, I just have a cell phone now, but when I used to have a landline, I'd get calls from solicitors and stuff, and they said, is Michael there? And I knew right away they didn't know me.
Oh, that's funny. So tell us a little bit more about your parents' tugboat, which I understand they still have.
That's right. Well, I call her my older sister because she was built in 1961 on Lake Union, and she was one of the last classical wooden tugs to be constructed, intended for actual service. She was not built as a yacht or a pleasure boat. She was actually built as a tugboat, a boom boat. So her job was to herd logs into rafts and pull them to sawmills. Back when that was really common. Tugs of Maggie B's class are almost extinct now because now so much of that is done, on big it's done by trucks. The trucks haul the logs to ports where they're loaded onto giant barges, and so you don't get much of the small tugs pulling small loads of logs and rafts to mills, mm-hmm. like used to be common practice all across Puget Sound. Mm-hmm. That used to happen all the time, and now you almost never see that anymore. Yeah. So tugs that were designed for what Maggie B was designed for are almost totally obsolete now. Mm-hmm. You almost never see them. But Maggie B was designed as a small tugboat by the great Pacific Northwest boat designer. May he rest in peace. He just passed away this year at the age of 92, I believe.
That's William Garden?
William Garden, yeah. Mm-hmm. And so because Maggie B had been designed by William Garden, and I grew up on Maggie B and knew what a good boat she was, I realized that I wanted to build a boat that was designed by William Garden. Okay, all right.
So you went through school here at Warm Beach, and then you went to college in Maine, is that right?
Yeah, I'm a real history buff, particularly an American history buff. Mm-hmm. And so I've been interested in the Civil War all my life. And so I did research and I found, most people who are interested in the Civil War, they'll take either side, or they are fiercely loyal to the South. And I'm one of those oddballs I'm fiercely loyal to the Union. Mm. And most people aren't, but I am fiercely loyal to the Union. And the funny thing is that if you want to find high-ranking Union officers that are people who you'd want to emulate, it can be kind of tough to find that. And so I found this man named Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain, who has since become famous because of the movie Gettysburg, which came out in '93, and some other things. But he's basically become an officer that people who like the Union, who like the North, can... Because he was an officer and a gentleman, and he was a professor at this college called Bowdoin College, which is in Brunswick, Maine. And so I did research, and I found that not only does Bowdoin still exist, it's one of the best schools in the country. So I applied, early decision, thinking there was no way I was going to get in, and they let me in.
Wow.
So the rest is history. I went back to Maine to school. And then I wanted to be a history professor. But again, I did my homework, and I found that that there's an incredible amount of competition for history teaching positions. I mean, there's something like... I don't know what the numbers are, but an incredible, 100 history PhDs for every one job that's available, or something like that. So what I realized would be a better deal was I'm also interested in film production. And I went to film school in Southern California at Chapman University in Orange, California. And I became a film professor because most people who get an advanced degree in film production don't want to teach. They want to work in the industry. And so if you've got a terminal degree, an MFA, Master of Fine Arts, in film production, and you want to teach, the odds are a lot better. And so that's what happened. And I got a job at Morningside College in Sioux City, Iowa, teaching film production. Okay, all right. So you moved to Morningside, and you were teaching there. So tell me about how this idea of building a wooden boat and sailing it 4,000 miles through the river system and up the East Coast. How did that start? Well, excuse me. Well, actually, my desire to build a wooden boat is as old as I am. Mm. I mean, even when I was a tiny little kid, I would go down and I would take a hammer and some nails and try to pound a couple of drift logs together and make a raft. I always wanted to build a wooden boat. Yeah. And having grown up on a wooden boat, I always wanted to build a wooden boat. So that idea, that general idea, has been with me my whole life. But when I moved to Sioux City, you have to understand that when I grew up in Warm Beach, my parents lived right on the water. Yeah. Literally, right on the water. When I went to school in Maine, I was about 1 mile from salt water. Mm-hmm. When I was in Southern California, I was about 10 miles from salt water. When I was in Sioux City, I was 1,400 miles from the nearest salt water. And, there were, there were some lakes. There was like the Okoboji Lakes, and then there was the places where they dammed the Missouri River, and there was reservoirs that you could, But, in terms of cruising grounds, Iowa, South Dakota, Nebraska, they're not famous for having places where you can do a lot of sailing, and cruising. So that was something that I could really keenly feel. I remember going to the Henry Doorly Zoo in Omaha, and with a friend of mine, and we went to. They had a little aquarium like set up for the zoo, and I walked around the corner. And I just kind of froze in this sort of surprise and excitement, and my friend was like, "What's the deal?" I said, "That smell. Can't you smell it?" She said, "Yeah, it kind of stinks." I was like, "Yeah, it's salt water." It's like, I can smell the smell of salt water. And it was, they had, basically, you can order bags full of saltwater minerals that you can dump into fresh water and mix it up and make it approximate seawater.
Really?
And that's what they had done.
At the zoo.
Yeah, but it smelled like salt water. Mm-hmm. And I just about went crazy being landlocked in the middle of the continent. I mean, if you look at a map of North America, Sioux City is about as landlocked as it gets.
Yeah.
I mean, North Dakota is closer to salt water because of Hudson's Bay. Mm-hmm. So, but what I realized was there was a water escape route. The Missouri River flowed past Sioux City. Went right past Sioux City, and you could go all the way down the Missouri and then all the way down the Mississippi to the Gulf of Mexico. And when I realized that, I was just like, wow, okay. So that's how the idea was born. And one of my friends said, well, it's like a really long hill. It's like, yeah, you can go down this really long hill. And yeah, I mean, it was according to the Army Corps of Engineers, it's about 1,700 miles by river from Sioux City to the Gulf of Mexico. And so that's how the idea was born. Mm-hmm. But then I realized that I didn't have to stop there. There was this protected waterway that basically it goes from Brownsville, Texas on the Mexican border all the way up to New York. And there are some gaps in it, but it's called the intercoastal waterway. And it's a protected waterway that consists of bays, rivers, lakes, things like that have been connected by this series of canals. And when I found out about that, I decided... See, I mean, I wanted to... When I left Sioux City, I wanted to, go home, so to speak. Mm-hmm. I wanted to, and I didn't really want to go through the open Pacific Ocean in my 14-foot sailboat, so I realized I looked at Maine as like a second home.
Okay.
And so I was like, okay, I'm going to go home to Maine, mm-hmm. because that I can do. Mm-hmm. I can go up the East Coast, up the Intercoastal Waterway.
So had you already built your boat at this point?
Well, while I was a professor at Morningside, I was a professor there for 5 years. And so while I was a professor at Morningside, I built Adventure. That's my boat's name, Adventure.
Okay. Yeah.
So I built her while I was working at Morningside over the summers.
Oh, okay.
Had I not had the summers, Adventure would still be sitting in a garage somewhere half finished.
Right.
Because, I mean, those big chunks of time were really, really nice to have.
Yeah.
So
you started building her before you decided to make this trip, it sounds like. Or kind of as you were deciding, or?
Well, I started. I actually the idea for the trip came first. When I watched the waters of the Missouri River rolling past Sioux City, heading towards the sea, every day I could see that water, and I knew that in about 3 months that water would be in salt water, mm-hmm. At the Gulf of Mexico. So the trip came first, and then I started to investigate different designs that I thought would work for that trip.
Okay. Yeah.
But I did, and a bunch of people suggested a bunch of things. There was this dory that a guy suggested. Mm-hmm. Another fellow suggested a Whitehall style boat that he had designed. But I knew I wanted William Garden.
Okay.
Because of Maggie B. And then the other thing was that Maggie B's my parents' tugboat. I don't know if I mentioned that.
Okay.
But yeah. But there were a number of other considerations. See, I wanted to make sure that I built a boat that could cruise on her own and be relatively comfortable by herself, but who would make a good companion for Maggie B rather than a competitor for Maggie B. Mm-hmm. Because, eventually my parents say that I'm going to have Maggie B. And so when I have her, I didn't want to build a boat that would compete with her, but that would... And Maggie B and Adventure are perfect together. Maggie B can tow Adventure, and then you can anchor Maggie B and you can go exploring in Adventure, sailing all around. But obviously Adventure can go on her own. She did.
And Adventure is the 14-foot pram that you built for this trip.
Yes, sorry. I keep forgetting what I've said and what I haven't. Yes, Adventure is the boat that I built, the 14-foot
So tell us
pram.
a little bit about Adventure, her design, and building that boat.
Well, Adventure was designed originally, I should say, the Commodore Trunnion class sailing pram. That's what Garden called her when he designed her.
Really?
She was originally designed as an open boat and as a day sailor training boat to teach young people how to sail. Mm-hmm. And so... basically, William Garden's friend, a man named Garrett Horder, came to him and said that he wanted, a training boat for his grandkids to train them how to sail. And so, basically, he wanted a boat that would perform well under sail, but that would have very, very good stability. He wanted to train... Garrett Horder wanted to train his grandkids on a sloop rig, so a mainsail and jib, rather than a catboat, which just has one large mainsail, usually. And so his demand, his specifications were quite demanding. The boat had to be very short, so it could be stored in a garage. But very stable, but also had to perform well, had to have enough buoyancy to float the crew if swamped. And also he wanted reasonable cost of building. And Garden wrote in an essay that he wrote about the design, everything worked out very, very well with this design. He said, except that we missed by a mile our nod towards reasonable cost of building.
Oh, really?
He said, this due to the amount of work in these one-off wooden boats, and he said if they were tooled up and built out of fiberglass, they would be a reasonable value.
Yeah.
But I didn't really care so much about the value. I wanted to... The irony of me building a sailboat was that I had never really sailed.
Oh.
Maggie B is a powerboat.
Yeah, right.
She's a tugboat. So, I've been on the water all my life. I have a lot of experience on the water, but not in sailboats. Mm-hmm. And so that was one of the key points about that design, was the fact that boat was designed for beginners. It was designed to train people how to sail. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And if you look at a cross-section in the plans, it really is incredible. Adventure's design is amazing because the wetted surface, the part of the boat that's underwater, is very minimal unless she starts to heel. If she starts to roll over, then there's a whole bunch of area in her sides, a whole bunch of freeboard that hits the water and keeps her from rolling over. Oh. So she's incredibly stable. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How many 14-foot boats could have two people who weigh over 250 pounds stand on the rail and not capsize?
Really?
My friend and I, when we're both pretty hefty people, we stood right at the beam on the rail, and she didn't dip the rail under.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Incredibly
Super
stable.
Cool.
Super stable.
Cool.
But, she's she's not a speed demon. She doesn't go very fast. Mm-hmm. Under sail, I would say maximum speed is maybe 4 knots. Mm-hmm. Maybe.
Yeah.
That's probably being generous. I mean, 3.5, probably max.
Yeah.
Under power, a little 4-horse motor I've got, I can maybe get her up to 4.5, maybe 5 in still water.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But she wasn't designed for that. She was designed to be stable.
Mm-hmm.
And then she also, one of my favorite features is she has a sliding gunter rig, which basically means you have a short mast and then you have a gaff or a sprit that's like a, if you have a gaff rigged, cutter or catboat or something like that, where there's a spar or basically long piece of wood that supports the top of the mast. Well, that's basically what I've got, except that extra spar acts as an extension of the mast. It basically goes straight up. And so what it does is it gives you a much taller, you can put your mainsail much taller up, much higher up, while still having a short mast. And so people have asked me, that rig is not very common in North America. It's a lot more popular in Europe. And so people ask me, well, why would you go through the trouble of making a rig like that? Why wouldn't you just build a tall mast? Well, there's a couple of reasons. One is it gives you, when the rig is down, it gives you a lower center of gravity, which means you're less likely to capsize at a mooring in heavy weather. So there's that. But the two major advantages, one of them is the spars are a lot shorter. They stow within the length of the boat to make it a lot easier for trailering. So there's that. And then the most important feature on my trip was that simply by letting out on the halyard, or the line that raises the mainsail, I could shorten the mast by about 10 feet.
Oh.
And so I could go, well, not shorten the mast, but shorten the rig, by about 10 feet. And that allowed me to go under bridges that were really short. That allowed me to go under overhanging trees. I mean, all kinds of stuff like that.
I see.
So
that was pretty handy design.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Adventure's design is a true tribute to William Garden. It was just an incredible design that he came up with. And then I with Garden's approval, and also the approval of another boat designer named Paul Gartside, I modified the design slightly. I put a deck on her, not a very big deck, but a deck, and then a cuddy cabin, a little cabin for storing, for storage, basically. And the disadvantage to that is that added some weight in the bow. Originally in the bow it was just supposed to be a seat. And so, but then again, I'm really heavy, and so when I sit aft, she rights herself and sits on her lines. So there was that, but Wooden Boat Magazine, when I wrote a story for them, actually reclassified her as the adventure class sailing pram because of those modifications.
Really?
And so I was absolutely delighted.
Yeah. So you got your own class of sailboat.
That's right.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. So how long did it take you to build Adventure? Or what period of time?
Well, 5 years.
5 years. Wow.
And that only because I had those summers.
Yeah.
I had those summers off. I mean, it's...
So how many hours do you estimate?
Well, I put in... I think I put in about... Oh, gosh. Well, okay, I guess we'll have to do the math. I'm not very good at math, but, so basically for 3 months I worked at least 40 hours a week, often longer.
So that's about 500 hours a summer.
Yeah. So times 5.
2,500 hours maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So, I mean, it's a lot of...
Yeah.
It's a lot of hours. It's a big commitment.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I remember reading somewhere that... as you add these features or as you add different construction materials, there was like this graph. I think maybe it was a wooden boat or something like that, but there was this graph that showed the complexity of a boat and the percentage of people who actually complete a boat if they start to build it. And it starts with a really basic plywood skiff, and then that the completion rate is near 100% on that. But then you go up, and when you start saying, okay, round bilge, which Adventure has, and then a complicated rig and all this other stuff. A boat like mine, I think most people starting out to build something like that, the rate that people don't complete is like 90% or something like that, or more. And I can understand why. And for me, I'm not trying to brag or anything. It's because I was a teacher and I had summers off that I had the time to do that, because otherwise there's no way I would have ever had the time to do a project like that, because you need those chunks of time.
Mm-hmm. So what did you complete the boat in 2007? Is that right?
Well, she was launched in 2007
here at Kayak Point, near where we are today.
Right.
Yeah, and you had a christening and family, and cool, very sweet.
My late grandmother christened her with a little bottle of champagne.
Nice.
The park staff would not allow us to break the bottle of champagne over the bow, because they didn't want glass shards, on the beach where people were running around in bare feet. So, which I thought was sensible enough. So my grandmother just poured the champagne over her bow. Oh, okay. But the nice thing was we got to save the bottle. So I still have the bottle
very cool.
as a souvenir.
Yeah, very cool.
But that was basically, I could just do really basic rowing, or we did like one sail at the very end of 2007. But I made the centerboard it was made out of aluminum, and I made it exactly according to Garden's plans. But the centerboard was about half an inch too long. And so what happened was the centerboard, the aft part of the centerboard actually hit the trunk, and so it wouldn't drop down. Oh. And so it was really embarrassing. I had to call my dad. He had to come with his aluminum boat and had to tow us all the way back, because we'd sailed with the wind, and then we were going to try to tack, and we couldn't get the board down. Oh. So even though we had the current in our favor, we were just making so much leeway. We just kind of, I think we gained maybe about 50 feet or so, tacking back and forth all afternoon. Wow. So it's really important to have a keel.
Crazy, yeah. Interesting. So in August of 2009, you started your trip from Sioux City, Iowa. You went down the river system to the Gulf of Mexico, then intercoastal waterway up to Maine. Uh-huh. So give me some highlights of that trip.
Oh, wow!
I know you have thousands of them.
Yeah, it's so hard to choose. But my friends in Sioux City saw me off, which was really neat. In Omaha, there is a spectacular exhibit about a steamboat called the Bertrand. In 1865. In April of 1865, just before the end of the Civil War, she struck a snag and sank in about 12 feet of water. And her cargo was completely covered by mud, and she became a time capsule. And they discovered her 100 years later in the 1960s, and there's this spectacular museum near Omaha that has all of her artifacts on display. Really? And it's unbelievable. It's just like one of the most amazing museums I've ever been to, and like nobody knows anything about it. It really is. I mean, she was bound for, Bertrand was bound for Fort Benton, Montana, on the Missouri River, and then her cargo was bound for Virginia City in Montana. It was mining equipment. Mining equipment, wow. But I mean, it was like she was like, the Bertrand was like a 19th century supermarket. I mean, because she had everything on board. I mean, clothes that were preserved in the mud, bottles of vegetables and I mean, you could still see the florets on the broccoli. I mean, just incredible. I mean, there were bottles of medicine, bottles of whiskey that were still corked. I mean, all this stuff still had the cork in it. I mean, it was just unbelievable. It was just really unbelievable to see all this stuff. I mean, picks, shovels, everything that you could imagine. So that was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I knew about that before I started the trip.
Yeah.
And there were places that I saw that I thought were going to be amazing, that were amazing, and that I expected all along, like New Orleans was incredible. Charleston, South Carolina is a mecca for American history lovers like me. D.C., New York. There were just lots of places I thought were going to be great, and they were. But I think probably one of the best things that happened to me on the trip is stuff that I experienced that I never expected. Like, for example, White Cloud, Kansas.
White Cloud, Kansas. That sounds pretty obscure.
It's a tiny town on the Missouri River of about 200 people. It's named after a local Native American chief named White Cloud. And they had this little dock on the Missouri there, and I tied up to it, little municipal dock. And it said Marina, White Cloud, Kansas. And there was this tiny little dock and an outhouse up there, but it was great. And they were having an antique and like rummage sale. The whole town was doing this. It's something that they do twice a year. And it just so happened that weekend was the weekend.
Oh, wow.
And I got to talk with all the locals, and they had all these really neat whitewashed buildings that were all built out of lumber brought upstream by steamboats. Because there's no timber there. That's all on the plains. So all of these old buildings were built in the 19th century, and they were all built out of lumber from steamboats.
Wow.
I mean that they got off of steamboats.
Yeah, right.
But so yeah, I mean stuff like that I never would have. My motor broke down. I had an electric motor at first, kind of naively. I had an electric motor.
Oh, really?
Well, I wanted to be more environmentally friendly and all this kind of stuff, but
you had one of those German. Did you have one of the German rigs?
Uh-huh.
What do they call those?
Torpedo.
Right, right.
And I think it's a good motor. It's just that my particular motor that I had, there was something wrong with the wiring, and so it short-circuited.
Uh-oh.
And we've since had it repaired, and it works fine now. But I had to buy a gas engine, and I did that it was a 4-horse Mercury 4-cycle. And luckily for me, the folks at the St. Joseph Outboard Motor and Yacht Club in St. Joseph, Missouri, adopted me, took me in, and helped me buy that motor. And the electric motor would clamp on the coaming of the boat, so I didn't have a motor mount. Mm-hmm. Well, the gas motor wouldn't clamp on the, so I had to actually buy and install a mounting bracket for that motor while the boat was in the water. I mean, it was extremely difficult to get everything level and stuff. But luckily, the gudgeons for the rudder, the holes that the rudder goes into, the brackets for those, of course, were put on when the boat was out of the water, and so they were level.
Oh.
And so I could go off of those.
Use that for a reference point.
As a reference point. But, yeah. I mean, it was really tough.
Wow.
When the boat was in the water. I mean, it was very, very tough.
Yeah.
And but we did it. We put the motor, the mounting bracket on, and we put the motor on, and as embarrassing as it is for a true sailor to admit, had I not had that motor, the trip would not have been possible. I'd still be somewhere in Georgia right now, probably.
Tacking somewhere.
Tacking back and forth. I mean, I ended up running under power, a lot more than I ran under sail.
Yeah.
But let's see, some other unexpected gems on the trip. Well, there was... When I left Sioux City, I told a good friend of mine, I said, the state that I'm going to travel through the most, I'm actually looking forward to the least. And he said, which state is that? And I said, Florida. It's got a really long coastline, and I'm going to be traveling through it the most, but I'm looking forward to it the least. He said, why? I said, well, it's all Disney World. It's all concrete and condos, and he said, oh no, there's a real Florida. He said, there's a real Florida, and you'll find it. And he was right. I did.
Yeah.
And I did, and it was fabulous. The Big Bend, or Nature Coast of Florida, as it's called, where the panhandle of Florida starts to curve down into the peninsula on the Gulf side, that is old Florida. That's real southern Florida. If you want to go and experience old Florida, that's where it is.
Mm-hmm. And
the reason is because there's really no tourist attractions there, other than fishing. There's some fishing there, so there aren't many tourist attractions, and most boaters avoid that area because it's very shallow and very difficult to navigate. But it was some of the best parts on the trip.
And that's where the Swanee River is, which the song was written about, which has its own story to it.
Yes, famous Civil War era composer Stephen Foster, who wrote that song, never lived in the vicinity of the Swanee River, and in fact, he never even saw the Swanee River. According to legend, he just looked at an atlas and he saw the Swanee River, and he's like, "Wow, that sounds southern. I think we'll go with that."
So he used that for the song and never did see that river.
If he had, though, he would find that he was right. It's very southern.
Yeah,
around the Swanee River.
Yeah.
You see the. Of course, when I was there, it was very cold. It was a record-breakingly cold winter.
Ooh.
That winter.
Yeah.
And there was actually ice in parts of the Swanee River, they said. And like the locals said, they said that never happens.
Wow.
They've never... people who've lived there all their life say that they've never seen ice in the Swanee River.
Really?
And so, yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. So you avoided a couple of hurricanes, too. But you got some effect from that.
Adventure and I dealt with not one, not two, but 3 hurricanes over the course of our trip. The first was in November of 2009. There was a hurricane called Ida that came through the Gulf, and it was downgraded to a tropical storm by the time it hit the Gulf Coast. So there was no damage really on the Gulf Coast. It was just a storm, a nasty storm. But when Ida broke up over the Appalachian Mountains, she, I guess you'd say she, dumped about 12 inches of rain in the Appalachian Mountains. And so the rivers that we were traveling on, I say we, meaning Adventure and I, and then by then I had met this guy named Buzz, who was a retired Vietnam veteran, and he was traveling in his own little 15-foot boat, and we traveled together for a while. Anyway, we were traveling on the Tom Bigby River at that point, which flows, it becomes the Mobile River and then flows into Mobile, Alabama. And we were about 200 miles from the coast in this little town called Demopolis, Alabama, when Ida struck. And the Tom Bigby River flooded, and flooded to such an extent they closed the locks on the river. And so navigation on the river was basically closed down for about 3 weeks. We were stuck in Demopolis.
Because you couldn't get through the locks, huh?
Right.
Really?
Well, they reopened the locks, but the locals urged us not to go until the river level dropped, because they just said it's just too dangerous.
Yeah.
And I am never one to ignore local advice. A lot of people do, and they're the ones who end up getting, running aground or capsizing or whatever. If the locals usually know what's going on, and if they say don't go, I don't go. And so I didn't, and we were there for 3 weeks. Then the other two came at the very end of the trip. There was Hurricane Earl, which was a hurricane that hit the New England. And I was in Massachusetts at that time, and so I ducked into Boston. As it turns out, Earl did very little damage in Boston. There was almost, nothing. It was just a lot of rain and wind. It was basically like a storm. But I had to go into Boston and take shelter in Boston because of that, because of Hurricane Earl. Mm-hmm. And then when we got to Maine, I was listening to the weather report, and the size of the waves usually correlates to the wind, right? I mean, they'll say wind 5 to 10 knots, waves 1 to 2 feet or something like that. Well, so I listened to the weather report on the radio, and it said winds 5 to 10 knots from the northwest, waves 15 to 18 feet. And I was like, what? I didn't understand what was going on. And the more I listened to the weather report, at first I thought I had misheard or something. And I listened again, and then it turns out there was a hurricane called Igor, which did not hit the United States anywhere. It was way out in the ocean. I think maybe the tail end of it caught Nova Scotia, but it went way out to sea, but it generated these huge swells. And so I decided to duck in to a hurricane hole, to as they call them in Maine, hurricane hole, to wait out the waves. And so I went up the Harrisicot River to South Freeport, Maine, and that turned out to be the final destination of my trip.
Okay.
I was going to go farther up the coast, but it was getting late in the season. It was already mid-September by that point, and I was going to go travel to see the people at Wooden Boat Magazine. But they told me that they were going to pull their docks out of the water, and so there wasn't going to be any facilities for me up there, and so I just decided to call it quits. So I just ended up driving up there.
Oh, okay.
To see them.
So it was about a 14-month trip, roughly, the whole thing?
It was, in terms of the traveling on the trip,
yeah,
it was 1 day shy of 13 months.
Okay.
I left Sioux City on August 17th, 2009. I arrived in South Freeport, Maine on September 16th, 2010.
Okay. Right.
So 1 day shy of 13 months.
Okay. So tell us about maybe along the trip, a time when you felt like you were in danger because of the seas or other things that were happening around you.
It's funny that you asked that, and like everybody has asked that question. And I'm doing an article for Wooden Boat Magazine that's supposed to come out in March of 2012. And they, of course, that was the first question they asked. When did you ever feel in danger? And the common assumption, which makes sense, the assumption that everybody has is that the most dangerous part of the trip, or the place where I felt the most threatened, was when I was on the open ocean, the open Atlantic Ocean. Mm-hmm. Because there were several times when I had to make open ocean crossings, passages. But actually, the ironic thing is that, and this is very counterintuitive, but deep water is actually safer for the most part than shallow water is. And the reason is that in shallow water, when the wind whips up, the waves come up very fast, and you have these really sharp breaking waves in shallow water. Whereas on the open ocean, where it's really deep, you have this huge mass of water. It's very deep. And so, the waves don't hit the shallow bottom and start to break. They become these big rolling swells, which are a lot safer for boats because you just kind of ride up and up and down on them. I mean, they'll make you seasick more than the breaking waves will, but they're a lot safer in terms of being on your boat. And so, I mean, had I been caught in a storm on the Atlantic, I'm sure that would have been very, very scary. But I wasn't. I watched the weather very carefully and would only go out if the wind was less than 15 knots at the most. Usually I preferred 5 to 10.
Yeah.
And I would just stay in a harbor if the weather wasn't cooperating. So, no, actually the scariest moment on the entire trip was on the Mississippi River.
Really?
And people, yeah, that's exactly what everybody says. They say, really? Yeah. The NOAA was predicting a big storm, and I was really anxious to get to this marina that was up the Tennessee River where I was going to travel. I didn't go all the way down the Mississippi. At the confluence of the Mississippi and the Ohio, I went up the Ohio and then up the Tennessee River and then down the Tombigbee River and then Mobile River to Mobile. That's where most pleasure boats go now. That's the pleasure boat route from the Midwest to the Gulf, because the lower Mississippi is almost entirely commercial, and there's very, very few facilities for transient boats. For example, between St. Louis and New Orleans, which is a distance on the river of over 1,000 miles, there's one marina.
You're kidding. Wow.
No, there's a marina in Memphis.
It's strictly a commercial waterway.
Huh?
Yeah.
There's one marina in Memphis. In Greenville, I think it's Greenville, Mississippi, I was told that there was a yacht club. But the guy who told me about it said, don't stay there overnight. It's like in a really bad part of town. So he said, like, you tie up during the day, go to like a grocery store, get some supplies, and then go anchor out somewhere. So I was like, oh, okay. Now, there's some towns on the Mississippi that are working on changing that. It's kind of funny because there are these towns that exist on the rivers, and the reason that they exist is because of the rivers. You know, that's why the towns are there. But they turned their backs on the rivers after, you know, steamboat navigation, stuff like that stopped. A lot of them built these big flood walls, and so they have nothing to do with their waterfronts. But now that's starting to come back. They're starting to redevelop their waterfronts and
realize there's some commerce there.
Right.
Opportunity for revenue and so on. Right.
So, for example, Natchez, Mississippi, which is a town that I just loved. I thought it was a gorgeous, gorgeous place. They are thinking about putting in a marina. And there's other cities that are going to do that. But for right now, the lower Mississippi is not recommended by most people.
I see.
So I did what they call the 10 Tom Waterway, the Tennessee Tombigbee Waterway, where they link them with canals. But anyway, so I was anxious to get to a marina on the 10 Tom Waterway. And so even though they were calling for strong winds, against my better judgment, I went out on the Mississippi and I rowed a ways, and aside from some strong headwinds, there really wasn't much problem that day. But then I couldn't find a good protected harbor for the evening. Usually what I would try to do is I would try to put adventure in a creek, or failing that, behind what they call a wing dike. And wing dikes are a big pile of rocks that the Army Corps of Engineers puts in the river about 45 degrees to the bank, aimed downstream. And so they basically keep the flow of the water in the channel. And so I found the ideal thing to find was sometimes they would have wing dikes that came out from the bank at a 45 degree angle, and then they had another line of rocks that went parallel to the river. And then there was like a gap, and then a little bit below that there would be another wing dike. So that was a perfect harbor.
Okay.
Because I could just go in there and it was completely protected from all sides. Well, I couldn't find that before dark. All I found was a regular wing dike. But there was a sandbar there, and so I thought, okay, well, this is relatively well protected. And so I went in behind that. Well, then they kept calling for a storm, and then the predictions got bigger and bigger. And then they issued a tornado watch, which means that, a tornado might happen. Then they issued a tornado warning, which means that tornadoes are imminent, that they're going to happen. And, of course, they listed all these counties, and one of the counties was the county in Illinois where I was. I think it was Alton County. And I remember looking out of Adventure's tent, because she had a boom tent that I would sleep under, and I unzipped it and I looked out, and it looked like there was a cement wall on the horizon that was coming straight towards me. Just looked like this giant wall of clouds that was moving straight towards us. And I zipped up the tent, and about 10 minutes later, it felt like someone had taken a fire hose and aimed it at my boat. Like they just sprayed my boat with a fire hose. So much water soaked in through the tent that I had to bail. I mean, it was so heavy, like so much water was coming down. I've never seen anything like that in my whole life.
Oh my goodness!
And the wind was blowing so hard against the boat that the rode or anchor line stretched, and all of a sudden I started feeling that Adventure was hitting something. Luckily, she was hitting against the sandbar and not the rocks of the wing dike, because she could have hit the rocks and then been really damaged, but the sand was fairly soft. So I had to climb out on deck while there was lightning and wind, and I had to, by hand try to haul my boat against that wind, that anchor rode, and tie it off, shorten the road. And then I was afraid the anchor would drag and all that kind of stuff. They didn't call off the tornado warning until 4 o'clock that morning. And there was no way I was going to be able to sleep, so I was up until 4 in the morning.
Oh, wow.
And basically, I mean, I think I kind of curled up in my rain gear after the tornado warning had been called off, and I think maybe I slept for about 45 minutes, something like that. And then I woke up again, and then I was like, I'm just going to pack up and go. And so I
Get out of Dodge.
just packed up my stuff and continued downstream.
Wow, pretty crazy.
But the next day, a giant flock of white pelicans flew over me. That was pretty neat.
Yeah, I bet. Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. Well, we're going to wrap it up here, Tug. I really appreciate you joining me today. Do you have any contact information if somebody wanted to email you, for instance?
Oh, sure.
Would that be okay?
Absolutely.
Yeah, what's your email address?
Well, it's TUG_BUSE@yahoo.com.
Okay.
So it's basically Tug_Busey at yahoo.com.
Okay,
cool. We don't spell Busey with the Y. Mm-hmm. Just B-U-S-E.
B-U-S-E. Okay, yeah. Very good. Any parting comments for our listeners today?
Well, Mark Twain wrote, "You'll regret more the things you did not do in life than the things that you did." So, cast off the bow lines and sail off into the sunset. I mean, something like that.
Okay.
And I've talked to so many people who've said things like, "Well, okay, I'll do that when I retire, and or I'll do that, I'll wait off on that." And I can understand that, because people have jobs, they've got families, they have obligations. I was lucky that the circumstances in my life just happened to come together to allow me to do that trip. But what I would say to that is, I think a lot of times people could do something and they don't. Like they do have the opportunity, or they do have the money, or they do have the time, or they could make the time, and they decide not to for whatever reason. They talk themselves out of it. Mm-hmm. And I would encourage people to have adventures. It's what makes life really worth living.
Cool. Very cool. All right. Well, thanks again, Tug. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. I hope you enjoyed that interview with Tug. We had a great time doing that. Tug's a really cool guy. Actually lives in Port Townsend now, which is pretty awesome. And thanks, Tug, for letting me do that. You can connect with me by email, woodenboatdan@gmail.com. You can subscribe to my newsletter, leave comments on my website, or you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, and YouTube if you look for Wooden Boat Dan there. You can also subscribe to the Hooked on Wooden Boats weekly podcast on iTunes. You can leave a review for me there if you like the podcast. And if you're purchasing stuff at Amazon, it's a great opportunity to help me out just a little bit by going through my link before you make a purchase. That link is hookedonwoodenboats.com/Amazon. And if you do that and then make your purchase of anything on Amazon, I get paid a small commission. I would appreciate that. It helps me support the cost of doing the podcast. Well, have a great week, folks. It's a week before Christmas. Merry Christmas to you all. God bless you. Have a great week. Wooden Boat Dan over and out. Keep the bright side up and the barnacled side down. We'll talk again next week. Bye-bye.